Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and watched the stars stretch into lines as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The massive viewscreen showed the Kepler station hanging in space like a metal flower with its spinning rings and docking arms reaching out in all directions. After 3 weeks of travel from Earth, they had finally arrived at humanity's newest diplomatic outpost. Jake had been commanding starships for 15 years, but he still felt a thrill every time he saw one of these deep space stations. Humanity had only been part of the Galactic Council for 50 years, and every new station represented another step toward proving they belonged among the stars. The year was 2387, and humans were still considered newcomers by most alien species, but they had worked hard to earn their place through fair trade and honest diplomacy. Lieutenant Nancy Bell approached from the communications station with a datapad in her hand. She was young for her rank, barely 25, but she had a gift for languages that made her invaluable when dealing with alien species. Her brown hair was pulled back in regulation style, and her green eyes showed the kind of sharp intelligence that had earned her a place on the Defiance's senior staff. "Commander, we're receiving standard docking clearance from Kepler Station," she reported. "They're assigning us Base 7 on the diplomatic ring. Ambassador Helen Ward is already aboard the station waiting for our arrival." Jake nodded and turned to his helmsman. "Take us in, Lieutenant Foster. Standard approach, nice and easy." He wanted everything to go smoothly for this mission because the diplomatic meetings scheduled for the next week could determine humanity's role in several important trade agreements. The Defiance moved gracefully toward the station, its hull gleaming white with the blue Earth symbol painted prominently on both sides. Jake watched through the viewscreen as other ships from different species came and went from the station's many docking bays. He could see the long, sleek vessels of the Altarian Republic with their silver hulls, the bulky cargo haulers of the Centauri Merchants Guild, and the elegant curved ships that belonged to the peaceful Andorian Federation. But it was the group of dark red warships, holding position near the station's outer perimeter, that caught his attention. Their angular design and weapon arrays marked them as Zephyrian Empire vessels, and Jake felt a small knot form in his stomach. The Zephyrians had a reputation throughout the galaxy as a militaristic species that believed strongly in their own superiority over other civilizations. "Lieutenant Bell, are those Zephyrian ships part of the diplomatic mission?" Jake asked. Nancy checked her console and frowned. "No, sir, there's no record of Zephyrian participation in the trade negotiations. According to station control, they arrived 2 days ago and requested permission to remain in the area for what they called routine patrol activities." Jake didn't like the sound of that, but there was nothing unusual about military ships conducting patrols in neutral space. The Zephyrians might be arrogant, but they had never directly violated any treaties or agreements with humanity. Still, something about their presence felt wrong. The Defiance completed its docking procedures without incident, and Jake spent the next few hours reviewing the mission briefings and meeting with Ambassador Ward. Helen Ward was a skilled diplomat in her 50s who had been working with alien species since humanity first joined the Galactic Council. Her gray hair and kind eyes hid a sharp political mind that had successfully negotiated dozens of important agreements. "The trade negotiations should be straightforward," she explained as they sat in the station's diplomatic lounge. "The Altarians want to expand their technology sharing program. The Centauri Guild is interested in establishing new shipping routes through human space, and the Androians are proposing a joint scientific research project." Jake listened carefully, but part of his attention remained focused on the Zephyrian ships visible through the lounge's large windows. "What about the Zephyrians? Are they likely to cause any problems?" Ambassador Ward followed his gaze and shrugged. "They've been making noise lately about what they call the rapid advancement of primitive species in galactic affairs. I think they're referring to us and a few other younger civilizations that have gained influence quickly. But they haven't done anything more than complain in council meetings." Their conversation was interrupted when Lieutenant Bell's voice came through Jake's communicator. "Commander Morrison, Please report to the Communications Center immediately. We're receiving a priority message from Earth." Jake and Ambassador Ward hurried to the station's communication center, where they found several other human officers gathered around a large display screen. The image showed Admiral Ryan Pierce, the head of Earth's Stellar Defense Command, sitting at his desk in the Pentagon Space Operations Center. "Commander Morrison, Ambassador Ward, I'm afraid I have disturbing news," Admiral Pierce began. 3 hours ago, we lost contact with Captain Lisa Brooks and her crew aboard the UES Horizon. They were conducting routine scientific surveys in the Outer Rim sector when their communications suddenly went silent. Jake felt his heart sink. Lisa Brooks was one of the finest captains in the human fleet, and her ship carried a crew of 85 people, including some of Earth's best scientists and researchers. The Horizon was also one of humanity's newest exploration vessels, equipped with the latest technology and defensive systems. Do we have any idea what happened to them? Ambassador Ward asked. Admiral Pierce's expression grew grim. "We've been monitoring all communication channels, and 30 minutes ago we intercepted a broadcast from Zephyrian sources. They claim to have captured a human vessel and its crew for what they call evaluation of species worthiness. The broadcast was sent on all standard galactic frequencies." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Zephyrians had apparently decided to take direct action against humanity, and they had chosen to make it a public spectacle. Jake could see the anger building in the faces of his fellow officers. But he also recognized the careful way Admiral Pierce was presenting the information. "What are our orders, sir?" Jake asked. "For now, maintain your current mission and avoid any actions that could be seen as provocative," Admiral Pierce replied. "We're working through diplomatic channels to resolve this situation, but I want all human vessels to be on high alert. The Zephyrians may have made a serious mistake, but we need to be absolutely certain of our facts before we respond." After the communication ended, Jake found himself staring out at the Zephyrian warships with new understanding. They weren't conducting routine patrols, they were making a statement. By positioning themselves near humanity's diplomatic station while holding human prisoners, they were sending a clear message to the entire galaxy about their opinion of human capabilities and worthiness. Ambassador Ward placed a hand on his shoulder. "We need to proceed carefully, Jake. If we react too strongly, we could make things worse for Captain Brooks and her crew." Jake nodded, but inside he felt a cold anger building. The Zephyrians had just made what might prove to be a fatal error in judgment. They saw humanity as a young species that could be bullied and intimidated, but they had never bothered to study human history carefully. If they had, they would have learned that humans had a very particular response to anyone who threatened their own people. Captain Lisa Brooks stood in the center of what the Zephyrians called their Hall of Justice, but she knew it was nothing more than a mockery of real law. The massive chamber was filled with alien spectators from across the galaxy who had come to watch what was being broadcast as the trial of the century. Above her head, floating cameras captured every moment and sent the images to millions of viewers throughout civilized space. The Zephyrian judge, a tall creature with dark red skin and 4 arms, sat on an elevated platform that made him look down on everyone in the courtroom. His name was High Arbiter Zexamuth, and his cold black eyes showed nothing but contempt as he stared at Lisa and her crew. Behind him hung the golden banner of the Zephyrian Empire, with its symbol of a clenched fist crushing a star. Lisa had been brought to the fortress world of Vexmara along with her entire crew after their capture 3 days ago. The Zephyrians had surrounded the UES Horizon while it was conducting peaceful research in what should have been neutral space. When she had refused to surrender her ship without cause, War Marshal Kata Ver had disabled their engines and communications with weapons that left her crew helpless but alive. Now she stood with her hands bound behind her back, wearing the simple gray uniform that all prisoners on Vexmara were forced to wear. Her crew of 85 people stood in rows behind her, and she could see the fear in some of their younger faces. But she also saw determination in the eyes of her senior officers, and she knew they were all thinking the same thing she was. Earth would not abandon them. And the Zephyrians had no idea what they had just started. High Arbiter Zexamoth raised one of his 4 hands, and the noise in the courtroom died away. His voice was deep and carrying, designed to reach every corner of the chamber and every viewer watching the broadcast. We are gathered today to witness the judgment of these creatures who dare to call themselves the equals of their betters. Lisa felt her jaw tighten, but she kept her face calm. She had been a starship captain for 12 years, and she had dealt with hostile aliens before. The key was to never show weakness, never give them the satisfaction of seeing fear. She knew that everything she said and did in this courtroom would be seen by people across the galaxy, including her own government back on Earth. The species known as humanity has been granted membership in the Galactic Council despite their obvious primitive nature, the High Arbiter continued. They have been allowed to spread across space and establish colonies and outposts as if they were a mature civilization. But today we will demonstrate the truth about these creatures and their proper place in the galaxy. War Marshal Kadaver stepped forward from where he had been standing at the side of the courtroom. He was even taller than the judge, with scarred red skin that spoke of many battles. His military uniform was covered with medals and ribbons, and Lisa could see the cruel satisfaction in his expression as he looked at her and her crew. These humans were found conducting illegal activities in space that belongs to the Zephyrian Empire, he announced. When ordered to submit for proper inspection, they refused and attempted to flee. Their actions prove that humanity cannot be trusted to operate independently in civilized space. Lisa stepped forward, ignoring the guards who moved to stop her. "That's a lie, and you know it," she said in a clear voice that carried throughout the courtroom. "We were conducting legitimate scientific research in neutral space as guaranteed by the Galactic Accords. Your ships attacked us without warning or justification." The High Arbiter slammed his gavel down with enough force to make the sound echo through the chamber. "The prisoner will remain silent unless given permission to speak," he commanded. "Your protests only prove the arrogance that makes your species unfit for galactic society." But Lisa was not finished. She had been chosen to command the horizon, not just for her tactical skills, but for her ability to remain calm under pressure and speak truth to power. "You want to put humanity on trial? Then let me tell you what you're really dealing with. We are a species that has never abandoned our own, never surrendered to bullies, and never forgotten those who wronged us." The courtroom erupted in noise as alien spectators reacted to her words. Some seemed shocked by her defiance, while others appeared intrigued by this display of human courage. War Marshal Kadaver stepped closer to her with his hand moving toward the weapon at his side. "You speak of courage, but where is your mighty Earth fleet now?" he demanded. "Where are the legendary human warriors who will come to save you?" "I see only an empty sky and silence from your pathetic homeworld." Lisa smiled, and something in that expression made several of the Zephyrian guards take an involuntary step backward. "Marshal, you've made 2 mistakes that are going to cost you everything. First, you attacked peaceful explorers who were doing nothing more than studying star formations and cosmic radiation. Second, you did it in front of the entire galaxy and made it clear that this was a deliberate act of aggression against humanity." High Arbiter Zexamoth leaned forward in his chair. "And what do you think your precious Earth can do about it? The Zephyrian Empire has been conquering worlds since before your species learned to make fire. We have fleets that could reduce your entire solar system to cosmic dust." "Maybe you could," Lisa admitted, "but you've never faced anything like humanity before. We're the only species in this galaxy that unified our entire planet through warfare. We spent thousands of years fighting each other, learning every possible way to wage war, and developing weapons and tactics that would terrify you if you truly understood them." She paused and looked directly into the nearest camera, knowing that her words were being broadcast across the galaxy. "But more than that, we're the species that learns from every fight, adapts to every challenge, and never gives up when our own people are threatened. You think you're showing the galaxy how weak humanity is, but you're actually about to demonstrate why no one should ever make us their enemy." War Marshal Kadaver laughed, a harsh sound that filled the courtroom. Brave words from someone who will spend the rest of her short life in our mining colonies? High Arbiter, I request that you proceed immediately to sentencing. These creatures have wasted enough of our time with their primitive boasting. High Arbiter Zexamuth nodded and prepared to speak, but Lisa interrupted him one final time. You have 72 hours to release us and formally apologize to Earth for this unprovoked attack. If you don't, you're going to learn why humans are the only species in the galaxy that has never lost a war when our survival was at stake. The High Arbiter's sentence was swift and predictable. Lisa and her crew were condemned to life imprisonment in the mining colonies of Vexmara's outer moons. As the guards moved to escort them from the courtroom, War Marshal Kadaver announced that he would send a message to Earth giving humanity 72 hours to submit to Zephyrian oversight or watch their people die. But as Lisa was led away, she noticed something that made her heart lift with hope. Hidden among the alien spectators in the courtroom, she had spotted 3 individuals who looked almost human but not quite. They were probably from one of the species that had good relations with Earth, and they were taking careful notes of everything they had seen and heard. The word would reach Earth within hours, and when it did, the Zephyrians would finally understand what they had awakened. President Helen Carter stood in the Situation Room deep beneath the White House, surrounded by the most powerful military leaders on Earth. The wall screens showed star charts, fleet positions, and intelligence reports from across human space. Everyone in the room knew that the next few hours would determine not just the fate of Captain Brooks and her crew, but humanity's entire future among the stars. Admiral Ryan Pierce stood at the head of the table with his fingers pressed against the polished surface. His gray hair and weathered face showed the strain of the past 18 hours since they had received the Zephyrian ultimatum. Behind him, Colonel Sam Turner of the Marine Stellar Corps stood at attention, his uniform bearing the ribbons of a dozen campaigns across human space. Madam President, we have 48 hours remaining before the Zephyrian deadline, Admiral Pierce reported. Our response preparations are nearly complete, but I need your final authorization to proceed with Operation Thunderstrike. President Carter looked around the room at the faces of her advisors. General Patricia Hayes from the Joint Chiefs, Director Kevin Brooks from Intelligence, and Ambassador Susan Price, who had been recalled from the Galactic Council for this crisis. Each of them had spent their careers working to build humanity's reputation in the galaxy through peaceful means. Tell me one more time what we're looking at, the President said quietly. Admiral Pierce activated the main display, and the room filled with a 3-dimensional map of the Vexmara system. Red dots showed the positions of Zephyrian military assets, while blue markers indicated where human forces were already moving into position. The scale of what they were planning was unlike anything humanity had ever attempted. The Zephyrians have fortified Vexmara with 3 orbital defense platforms, 47 warships of various classes, and ground-based weapons that could destroy anything approaching the planet, Admiral Pierce explained. They believe these defenses make them untouchable, and for most species in the galaxy, they would be right. Colonel Turner stepped forward and pointed to several areas on the display. But they've made their preparations based on traditional galactic warfare tactics. They expect frontal assaults, prolonged bombardments, and the kind of honorable fighting that most alien species prefer. They have no idea how humans actually wage war. Director Brooks activated his own section of the display, showing intelligence gathered from sources throughout the galaxy. Our embedded operatives have been monitoring Zephyrian communications for months. They're completely confident that no human force could challenge their fortress world. War Marshal Kadaver has been boasting that he'll use our defeat as a recruiting tool for other species who want to join the Zephyrian Empire. President Carter studied the information carefully. She had been elected on a platform of peaceful expansion and diplomatic solutions, but she also understood that sometimes strength was the only language that bullies could understand. What about casualties, both ours and theirs? That's where human tactical doctrine gives us an advantage, Colonel Turner replied. We've planned this operation to minimize casualties on both sides while achieving complete military objectives. The Zephyrians will be defeated so thoroughly that resistance will become pointless, but we're not planning a massacre. Admiral Pierce brought up another section of the display showing human fleet positions throughout the galaxy. We've been quietly moving ships towards Zephyrian space for the past day. Captain Danny Walsh is commanding our stealth division, using the new cloaking technology that most alien species don't even know we possess. Commander Kate Sullivan has been working with our cyber warfare specialists to map every computer system in the Zephyrian military network. The President turned to Ambassador Price, who had been unusually quiet during the briefing. Susan, what's the diplomatic situation? How will the rest of the galaxy react to this? Ambassador Price straightened in her chair. Madam President, I've been in contact with several friendly species through back channels. Most of them are quietly hoping that someone will finally put the Zephyrians in their place, but they're all waiting to see if humanity has the capability to actually do it. She activated her own display showing political relationships throughout the galaxy. The Altarians and Androians will support us diplomatically if we succeed, but they won't risk direct involvement. The Centauri Guild is already calculating how this might affect trade routes. Everyone else is waiting to see who wins before they choose sides. General Hayes spoke up from her position at the far end of the table. The key factor is speed and overwhelming force. If we can defeat the Zephyrians quickly and completely, the galaxy will respect our strength. If this drags into a prolonged conflict, other species might join against us to prevent human expansion. President Carter walked to the large window that looked out over Washington. Even from this underground room, she could imagine the city above and the billions of people across Earth who were depending on her decision. Admiral Pierce, in your professional opinion, can we win this? Madam President, we can do more than win, Admiral Pierce replied with certainty. We can win so decisively that no alien species will ever again make the mistake of underestimating humanity. The Zephyrians chose to make this a public spectacle, so we'll give them and the galaxy a demonstration they'll never forget. Colonel Turner added, Our Marines have been training for operations exactly like this since we first encountered hostile alien species. We know their fortress world, we understand their tactics, and we've identified every weakness in their defenses. More importantly, we fight to win while they fight for honor, and that gives us an advantage they can't counter. The President returned to the table and looked at each person in the room. I want to be absolutely clear about our objectives. We rescue Captain Brooks and her crew. We eliminate the Zephyrian military threat. We do both of those things in a way that sends a clear message to every species in the galaxy about the consequences of threatening human lives. She paused and her voice grew harder. But we do not become the monsters that some aliens already think we are. We use exactly the amount of force necessary to achieve our goals and no more. We show the galaxy that humans can be peaceful neighbors or terrible enemies, but we always remain civilized beings. Admiral Pierce nodded. Understood, Madam President. Operation Thunderstrike is designed to achieve all of those objectives. Then, you have my authorization to proceed, President Carter said. Send a message to War Marshal Kadover. Tell him that humanity rejects his ultimatum and that he has 48 hours to release our people unharmed. After that, he'll learn why. Humans are the only species that has never lost a war when our survival was at stake. As the meeting broke up and the military leaders rushed to their commands, President Carter remained in the Situation Room staring at the display of the Vex Mara system. In less than 2 days, that system would become the site of the largest military operation in human history. The Zephyrians thought they were about to humiliate humanity in front of the entire galaxy, but they were actually about to witness the awakening of a sleeping giant across human space. Warships began moving toward their final positions while Marines prepared for ground assault and cyber warfare specialists readied their most sophisticated attacks. The 72-hour countdown had begun, and when it ended, the galaxy would understand that humanity was not just another species seeking its place among the stars. War Marshal Kadovar stood on the command deck of his flagship Eternal Dominion and watched the countdown timer reach 0. The massive Zephyrian fortress world of Vexmara hung below them like a red jewel, protected by the most powerful military force in this sector of the galaxy. He had ignored every human message and demand for the past 72 hours, and now it was time to show the galaxy what happened to species that dared to challenge Zephyrian authority. "Begin the execution," he commanded his communications officer. "Broadcast it on all frequencies so every civilization can witness the price of defying us." But before the order could be carried out, something impossible happened. Every screen on the command deck flickered and went dark for exactly 3 seconds. When they came back online, a human face was staring back at them from every display. It was Admiral Ryan Pierce, and his expression was cold as winter steel. "War Marshal Cadover, this is your final warning," the Admiral said in a voice that carried absolute authority. "Release our people immediately, or face the consequences of your actions." Cadover laughed and gestured for his weapons officer to destroy the human transmission. "Pathetic primitives. They think their simple technology can intimidate the Zephyrian Empire. All ships, prepare to demonstrate our power by destroying whatever pathetic force they've managed to gather." But his weapons officer was staring at his control panel with confusion and growing fear. "Marshal, I'm not reading any human ships in the system. Our sensors show nothing but empty space." "That's because you're looking for ships that fight like yours," came a new voice from behind them. Cadover spun around to see Commander Kate Sullivan materialize from what looked like empty air as her cloaking suit deactivated. Before any of the Zephyrians could react, she had placed a small device on the main computer console. "Cyber warfare. Division, you are clear to proceed." She spoke into her communicator as chaos erupted around her across the entire Vexmara system. Every Zephyrian computer network suddenly went offline simultaneously. Ship engines died, weapon systems shut down, communications arrays went silent, and even the life support systems flickered before emergency backups engaged. In less than 30 seconds, the entire Zephyrian military force had been reduced to helpless metal floating in space. That was when the human fleet revealed itself. Captain Danny Walsh's stealth division dropped their cloaking fields, and suddenly the space around Vexmara was filled with human warships that had been hiding in plain sight for hours. The sleek white vessels with their blue Earth symbols surrounded the disabled Zephyrian fleet like predators closing in on helpless prey. "All Zephyrian vessels, this is Admiral Pierce," came the voice over every communication channel that was still functioning. "Your weapons are offline, your engines are dead, and your shields are down. Surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded, or we will demonstrate why humans prefer to end conflicts quickly." War Marshal Cadover tried to issue orders, but his flagship's computer systems were completely unresponsive. Around him, his officers struggled with controls that no longer obeyed their commands. Through the viewports, he could see human ships moving with precision and speed that should have been impossible for vessels of their size. On the surface of Vexmara, Colonel Sam Turner's Marines were already beginning their assault on the fortress prison where Captain Brooks and her crew were being held. The human soldiers moved through the Zephyrian defenses like ghosts, using tactics and equipment that the aliens had never encountered before. Lieutenant Ben Foster led the rescue team through the fortress corridors, his enhanced combat armor allowing him to move faster and strike harder than any Zephyrian defender could match. His team had memorized every detail of the prison layout from intelligence gathered over the past months, and they moved toward their objective with mechanical precision. The Zephyrian guards tried to mount a defense, but they found themselves facing opponents who fought unlike anyone they had ever encountered. The humans didn't follow the traditional rules of galactic warfare that emphasized individual combat and honorable duels. Instead, they used coordinated team tactics, advanced technology, and ruthless efficiency to overwhelm their enemies at every turn. Dr. Rachel Stone's research into Zephyrian physiology proved invaluable when the Marines deployed sonic weapons that exploited specific weaknesses in alien hearing. The defenders found themselves disoriented and helpless as carefully tuned sound waves disrupted their ability to coordinate or even stand upright. Captain Brooks heard the sound of human weapons in the corridor outside her cell and felt her heart leap with hope. She had been counting the hours since the deadline passed, knowing that Earth would never abandon its people, but unsure how they could possibly assault the most fortified world in Zephyrian space. The cell door exploded inward, and Lieutenant Foster appeared in the opening with his rifle ready. "Captain Brooks, Lieutenant Foster, 3rd Marine Battalion. We're here to take you home." Lisa Brooks had never been happier to see another human being in her life. "How many ships did Earth send?" she asked as Foster's team began releasing her crew members from their cells. "Every ship we have, ma'am," Foster replied with a grin. "The Admiral decided that if we were going to make a statement, we might as well make it loud enough for the entire galaxy to hear." As the Marines escorted the rescued crew toward their extraction point, the battle for Vexmara continued to rage around them. But it was unlike any battle the galaxy had ever seen before. The humans didn't just fight to win, they fought to end the conflict so decisively that no one would ever want to repeat it. Above the planet, Admiral Pierce watched from the bridge of his flagship as human forces systematically dismantled every Zephyrian military installation in the system. His ships targeted weapons platforms, communication arrays, and command centers with surgical precision while carefully avoiding any civilian areas or non-military targets. War Marshal Kadaver finally managed to establish emergency communications with his remaining forces, but what he found was a military disaster beyond his worst nightmares. Half of his fleet was already disabled or destroyed. His fortress world's defenses had been neutralized, and human forces were advancing on every front with unstoppable momentum. "This is impossible," he said to his remaining officers. "No species in the galaxy has this kind of military capability." Commander Sullivan, who had been quietly observing from her position near the computer console, finally spoke up. "Marshal, that's because no other species in this galaxy spent thousands of years fighting wars against their own kind. We learned every possible way to wage war because we had to, and now you're facing the accumulated military knowledge of an entire planet that was unified through conquest." She gestured toward the tactical display showing the systematic destruction of Zephyrian forces. "This isn't even our full strength. This is what humans call a rescue operation." As if to emphasize her point, 3 more waves of human reinforcements dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. Fresh ships with full weapons and eager crews ready to join the battle if their comrades needed assistance. War Marshal Kadaver stared at the display and finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. He had thought he was dealing with a primitive species that could be easily intimidated. Instead, he had awakened something that the galaxy had never seen before, and now every alien civilization was watching as humanity demonstrated exactly why they should never be underestimated again. The war that the galaxy would remember as the 72-hour war actually lasted only 18 hours from first shot to final surrender. When the Zephyrian High Command on their homeworld received reports of the complete destruction of their most powerful fleet, they immediately sued for peace before humanity could turn its attention to their other military installations throughout the Empire. Captain Lisa Brooks stood on the bridge of her new ship, the UES Retribution, as she accepted the formal surrender from War Marshal Kadaver. The Zephyrian commander had been brought aboard the human flagship in chains, his once proud uniform torn and stained from the battle. His 4 arms were bound behind his back, and his black eyes no longer held the arrogance that had led him to capture human civilians. The Zephyrian Empire surrenders all military forces in this system and accepts full responsibility for the unprovoked attack on human personnel. Kadaver recited the words that had been prepared for him by his own government. His voice was hollow and defeated, nothing like the boastful tone he had used during Lisa's trial just days before. Admiral Pierce stood beside Captain Brooks as they watched the ceremony that was being broadcast throughout the galaxy. Every major news network and government was showing the images of the mighty Zephyrian Empire bowing before human military power. Captain Brooks, as the senior officer who was wronged by this attack, the honor of accepting their surrender belongs to you. Lisa looked at the alien who had threatened to execute her and her crew and felt no satisfaction in his defeat. She was a professional military officer, not someone who took pleasure in the suffering of others. But she also understood that this moment would be remembered for centuries, and her words would help determine how the galaxy viewed humanity from now on. War Marshal Kadover, your empire made a critical error when you decided to test human resolve, she said in a clear voice that carried to every corner of the ship and every viewer watching the broadcast. You thought we were weak because we preferred diplomacy to warfare. You thought we were primitive because we were newcomers to galactic society. You were wrong on both counts. She walked closer to the defeated Zephyrian commander and looked him directly in the eyes. Humans are not warlike by choice, we are warlike by necessity. For thousands of years, we fought against each other until we learned every possible way that wars can be won or lost. We unified our planet through conquest, and then we turned that unified strength toward the stars. War Marshal Kadover tried to speak, but Lisa held up her hand to silence him. You will return to your people and you will tell them exactly what you witnessed here. You will explain that humanity values peace above all things, but that we are exceptionally good at war when peace is no longer an option. You will make sure that no Zephyrian ever again makes the mistake of threatening human lives. The formal surrender ceremony continued for another hour as detailed terms were agreed upon and signed. The Zephyrian Empire would pay massive reparations for their unprovoked attack. They would submit to human oversight of their military for the next 50 years to ensure they never again threaten peaceful civilians. Most importantly, they would broadcast a full confession and apology to every species in the galaxy, but the real impact of the war was already being felt throughout civilized space. Ambassador Susan Price found herself overwhelmed with requests from alien governments who wanted to establish better relations with humanity. Species that had previously ignored human diplomatic overtures were now eager to negotiate treaties and trade agreements. On the waterworld of Aquatica, the Council of Deep Swimmers issued a formal statement praising human military efficiency and requesting a mutual defense pact. The crystalline beings of the Shard Collective sent gifts of rare minerals along with proposals for technological exchanges. Even the ancient and usually aloof Ethereal Communion reached out through intermediaries to suggest cultural exchanges. President Helen Carter addressed both Earth and the galaxy from the Oval Office 3 days after the end of hostilities. Behind her desk hung a new painting that showed human ships among the stars, a reminder that humanity had claimed its place in the galaxy through both diplomacy and strength. Fellow citizens of Earth and respected members of the galactic community, she began, the events of the past week have demonstrated something that I hope will never need to be proven again. Humanity seeks peace among the stars, but we will never allow anyone to threaten our people or our way of life. She paused and looked directly into the camera, knowing that her words were being translated into hundreds of alien languages and broadcast to billions of viewers. We did not choose this conflict, but we ended it decisively because that is the human way. When we fight to win completely and quickly so that the killing can stop and peace can be restored. The president's speech was followed by a military parade through Washington that showcased the technological capabilities that had surprised the galaxy. Advanced fighters flew overhead while ground forces displayed the armor and weapons that had proven so effective on Vexmara. But the real message was not about human military power, it was about human resolve. Captain Brooks, now promoted to Admiral Brooks in recognition of her courage during captivity, was given command of the entire Outer Rim Fleet. Her mission remained the same as it had always been, peaceful exploration and scientific research. But now every alien species in the galaxy understood that human exploration ships were backed by the full military might of a unified planet. The changes in galactic politics were swift and dramatic. Trade routes that had been closed to human merchants suddenly opened up. Scientific collaborations that had been rejected were now eagerly accepted. Military commanders from dozens of species requested permission to observe human training exercises so they could learn from the tactics that had defeated the Zephyrians so thoroughly. But perhaps the most important change was in how other species viewed conflict resolution. The old pattern of prolonged wars and negotiated stalemates began to give way to the human preference for quick, decisive action followed by generous peace terms. Many alien civilizations discovered that the human approach to warfare actually resulted in fewer casualties and faster recovery. Commander Jake Morrison, still serving aboard the UES Defiance, found himself assigned to a new patrol route that took him through former Zephyrian space. Everywhere he went, he was greeted with a mixture of respect and wariness from alien populations, who had heard about human military capabilities. During a stopover at a trading station in the former war zone, an elderly alien merchant approached him with obvious nervousness. The creature had 6 legs and skin that changed color with its emotions, currently showing the deep purple that indicated fear among its species. "Commander, may I speak freely?" the merchant asked in heavily accented standard. "Of course," Jake replied, curious about what the alien wanted to discuss. "My people have traded in this region for centuries, and we have seen many wars between different species. But we have never seen anything like what humans did to the Zephyrians. The speed, the precision, the complete victory followed by generous treatment of the defeated. It is unlike anything in our experience." The merchant's skin shifted to a lighter shade that indicated thoughtfulness. "We want you to know that your people have earned something that no other species has achieved in our memory. You have our respect, our friendship, and our promise that we will never forget what we witnessed." Jake nodded his understanding. "We appreciate that, but I hope you also understand that we would prefer never to have to demonstrate our military capabilities again. We came to the stars seeking knowledge and friendship, not conquest. That is exactly why the galaxy will never challenge humanity again," the merchant replied. "You have the power to conquer, but you choose to explore instead. You have the strength to dominate, but you prefer to cooperate. That combination makes you the most dangerous species in the galaxy to oppose, and the most valuable species to have as friends." As the UES Defiance departed the trading station and continued on its patrol, Jake reflected on how much had changed since that day at Kepler Station when they first learned of Captain Brooks's capture. Humanity had been tested by fire and had emerged stronger, more respected, and more secure in their place among the stars. The galaxy had learned a lesson that would echo through the centuries. Humans were not just another species seeking their place in the cosmic community. They were a force of nature that rewarded friendship and punished aggression with equal measure, and no alien civilization would ever again make the mistake of testing their resolve.